All right, so let's go ahead and move into module one. As I mentioned before, each one of these are just going to be little short videos to break up each one of these, kind of like we would do in class. So maybe a little bit shorter. I give you the opportunity to watch these videos whenever you need to. All right, so some of the objectives. We're just going to start out talking a little bit about some of the challenges that you might face in the future when it comes to environment and plant growth. We'll talk a little bit about ideal soils, some regenerative agriculture kind of things. Um, I'm not really like super hardcore on like the term regenerative agriculture, but I do believe that those principles that we're going to identify are important for meeting these future challenges. We'll talk a little bit about the functions, and then finally, we'll end up with some plant essential nutrients that are important for our plants to grow, and they get those from the soil. All right, so some of the challenges that we're going to be facing, many of us have heard that we're going to need to feed about 2 or 3 billion more people, and we're probably going to degrade our soils while trying to do that as we intensify agricultural production. We're probably not going to be real good on our soils. Next, we want to preserve and enhance that soil fertility because nutrient resources are going to be scarce, and we're going to also need to increase fertility, fertilizer applications in order to feed these people by growing more crops. So that is not only counterintuitive because they want us to grow more food while using less resources, and if we don't have enough resources in the soil, how are we supposed to get the food? And then how are we going to get those into the city so that we can feed these people? Another big issue that's going to come up is going to be the water supply. We are quickly irrigating crops so that we can grow more crops. We're getting our droughts are becoming more and more prevalent. Although we may get about 60 inches of rainfall in Tennessee, we typically get it all within like 1 or 2 months, and not typically in the soil time in the summertime when our soils are being used and grown for crops. Typically, we'll get our rainfall while we're trying to plant, and then also when we're trying to harvest, and very little in between. And so we also want to protect our waters from that, and soils is going to play a big role for that. Ultimately, we're wanting to, manage our lands so that they're sustainable, so that they can continue to be productive. And some of the ways that they want to do that is integrating biochar and some of these other biofuel feedstocks. And by biofuel feedstocks, we mean growing things like corn for ethanol. Maybe we're growing miscanthus for some ethanol. We're trying to get some alternative energy sources instead of just using gasoline. So back to this, not only are we growing, food for trying to feed 2 billion more people, but we're also probably trying to, create enough energy as far as fuel goes in order to be able to for these extra 2 billion people to drive where they need to go. Ultimately, you might have heard the term climate smart agriculture, and that is really going to focus on managing our soils to mitigate this climate change. Now, do you really think that we are going to reverse whatever potential, possible climate change that we're experiencing? Probably not going to reverse it. But what we can do is not add to it. And so, kind of in module three, we'll talk a little bit about how soil can actually sequester some of that carbon, carbon sequestration in order to increase the soil health, and then also at least improve or not degrade environmental quality. One of the ways that we're going to do that is by looking at these biotic communities, so our soil microbial populations, how they respond to different fertilizers, different treatments. How do we improve the carbon content in the soil so that these biotic communities have at least something some energy so that they can grow? Some of the other things are going to be Better plant production, better soil health is going to increase biodiversity. And by increasing biodiversity, we are going to improve our ecosystems, increase our habitats, such as things like pollinators, maybe our bird species, our different macro and microfauna, or when I say that, I mean like earthworms and beetles and things that kind of go through the soil and help us recycle and decompose some of that plant material. We're going to be able to use soils in order to basically detoxify some of these contaminants. And so, for my PhD, one of the things that I was looking at was that phytoremediation, such that we can use plants to improve water quality based on those biogeochemical reactions. So, having an understanding of these reactions, this biogeochemical reactions, we can actually improve and detoxify some of that soil so that we can improve its productivity. And then ultimately, we're going to need some, some large global perspectives to operate the management in local places. And so, just because we've been doing it like we've always been doing it doesn't mean that there isn't a better way. So, understanding how other countries or other ecosystems are optimizing some of these things that we've just recently talked about are going to help us improve our um, ecosystem and our management of our land as well. I bring up this picture. One morning, a colleague and I were talking, and he said that one of his biggest fears was that the earth was going to become a place that was very difficult or not conducive to be outside. And, given that global warming or climate change is not likely to reverse, he probably has a good point because our temperatures are starting to increase 1 or 2 degrees every year over time. Maybe in 5, 10 years now we've got, an increase of about 20 degrees Celsius or 20 degrees Fahrenheit, whichever. Um, we have a 20-degree temperature increase, and it might not be habitable. So we might have to start growing our crops indoor. And one of the things about that is that you have a very limited amount of space in order that you're going to intensively manage. And so understanding what happens when you intensively manage a soil is going to help you kind of know what you're doing when you put the nutrients in and you're taking the nutrients out and how to replenish that and making sure that you're not depleting this. Because if you deplete this little, greenhouse, all the soil within this greenhouse, what are you going to do then? You can't just pick this greenhouse up and move it over to the next plot. So in the future, it's possible that this might be a significant means of production, and understanding the basics of soil is going to help us manage these little small plots.